All right, I guess we are live now. Hello, everybody, to the first hybrid Ruby Tuesday. I mean, we used to do like mix for both, right? We used to have StreamYard before this as well, but I guess like it's post-COVID hybrid event. So we're both online in YouTube and also in HiveKind's office in Bangsa South. So if you are in HiveKind office, you get to have pizza. So thank you, HiveKind. So next time anybody wants to have pizza, want to join, and you're healthy to join, yeah, definitely go visit HiveKind in the next Ruby Tuesday. All right, let's get Ruby Tuesday 92 kickstarted then. Hold on. All right. Okay, as usual, Ruby Tuesday is brought to you by Engineers.my and KL Ruby Brigade, and also this time in HiveKind's office. Join our Facebook group for all the events and also job posting. Meetup.com is where all the event details are. So if you want, for example, the YouTube link or you want the details on how to reach HiveKind's office, it's all right there. GitHub for all code related things, especially like previous workshops we have done, and also sometimes the slides and keynotes, those are available there as well. Slack, if you have any quick questions or just want to hang out and chat. I did say Slack, right? And Discord also, we sometimes use Discord for code clinics and like longer, more community related stuff. So find us at Discord as well. I'm Goy.
I'm going in Penang.
Right, I guess you can
people,
yeah,
and we have people in HiveKind. Say hi. Hey.
Hart and Tristan is there. And we have a speaker in our backstage as well. Yeah, first reminder, since this is a hybrid, we're still using StreamYard. So first reminder is if you type a comment or chat in YouTube, your profile name, your profile picture, and comment might show up on the stream, especially if you ask a question and we want to show the question. Second reminder is our event code of conduct. So we do follow the Ruby community conduct guideline. So please ensure that all the participants here and you yourself are following with these guidelines. All right, hiring shoutouts. I don't think there's any in Slack. So we do have a job channel in Slack for anyone who's looking to hiring. I don't think there's anything new between last month and this month. Anything on Facebook that we want to shout out? I didn't check, so I'm not too sure.
Wasn't there the cater spot from Slack channel?
Oh yeah, that's last month, right? I think. But yeah. Thanks for bringing that. Yeah, there's cater spot. I think I'm not sure what role they're hiring, or as in like the region they're hiring in. But I think since they're open,
yeah, I think they're doing KL,
right.
but the company is based on Singapore, and then they're doing it remote, and probably because KL because they want, I guess, cheaper rates if you live here, and then you just like transfer over to Singapore for certain days. I'm not sure, but you should check out the Slack channel. You ask whoever posted it there for more information.
Yep. So yeah, they give quite a detail on like how they work and about who they're looking for. So definitely check that out in the jobs channel in Slack. And also, I mentioned earlier, we do have people posting in the Facebook group as well, looking for Rails or Ruby engineers. So if you're looking for a job or you're considering moving companies, like hang out in these two places. So yeah, I guess we can move on. Okay, the first talk today is TDD and Experience Report by Afif. So let us grab Afif in. Afif, are you ready?
Can never be ready. Let's just wing it. Okay, I'm gonna share my screen. Hope this works. All right. Let me know if. Okay, I can see that.
You're good. All right, the floor is yours.
Right. Thank you, Goy. Welcome to the Ruby Meetup, and thank you for listening. My name is Afif Soheli, and I work as a senior software engineer at Ascender Loyalty. We are hiring, by the way, so you can go and check. I can share the slides later. But basically, just Google Ascender Loyalty and careers page. So I also co-host a software engineering podcast called Copy Overflow on Spotify, and Gui is actually one of my co-hosts as well. Give it a listen. We talk about a lot of topics related to software development, agile testing, blah blah blah. So I've been in industry for about 8 years now, working with a wide range of tech, and not just Ruby. In fact, probably half of that is not Ruby related. So yeah, I have these 8 years of experience, and I have very very strong opinions about automated testing. That I do believe that it is the core component of a quality code base that basically will trickle down to other quality practices, right? So for example, like if you're gonna move to continuous integration, you cannot do that without automated testing. Or it's a signal, for example, if that company is practicing good automated testing, then it's a signal that the whole company understands about quality, because your product manager has to okay the time to actually write tests also with every piece of code that you want to ship. And that means they are probably okay to spend time for other quality projects as well. So it kind of trickles down from automated testing, but the root is usually automated testing. So this is an experience report. It's not basically trying to teach you anything about TDD. It's just my experience. So for 8 years, I've actually survived 7 years without TDD, and I just started doing TDD late last year. So and I know, right? So TDD, like I talk about TDD, like this is so old school, and people kind of like forgot about it already. But so just a quick intro about what TDD is that basically every time you do product development, so you write the test first and then ensure the tests fail, and then you write the simplest code to make those tests succeed, and then you start refactoring. So this is called the red-green refactor method, right? So you make sure the tests are red, and then you do the simplest thing to get the test to be green, and then you kind of evaluate your code and then refactor based on that test. And I know that it can sound extreme. In fact, it actually comes from a book called Extreme Programming. So, but extreme programming also gave us other great development practices, right? Like pair programming, continuous integration. So so I felt like maybe I can evaluate this one as well. And the reason why I started diving into TD is because of this person. This guy is Dave Farley on YouTube. He runs a channel called Continuous Delivery, and he keeps on repeating this belief that says that practicing TDD helps with guiding your software design. And that got me curious because I was trying to improve, like see what I can improve. How can I improve my software design, right? So I dived into TDD because of that channel. So, and the first endeavor comes when I had a technical interview in late 2021. So the company gave a technical test, like a take-home interview question. So I need to write code, and the technical interview question is something like this. It's not everything, but it's kind of like a slimmed down version of that. So like let's say there are multiple tenants, and then the tenant's customer hit this endpoint to search for items, and then each tenant will call like a supplier API to get the base cost of the item, and then each tenant will basically calculate the final marked up price. Have their own strategies basically. So different percentage markup, or like there's a fixed fee, or the different rounding logic, or a way to actually filter out the search results, right? So for example, if the final price is $1,000 or more than $1,000, do not show that in the search result. I'm not sure why there's such requirement. I don't think that's gonna be in a real world use case, but I mean it's a technical test, right? So maybe they just randomly put requirements there, and I figure out that maybe this is a good place to start, right? But the thing is, how do you start? Because it requires a mindset shift to be starting to start writing tests first, and then after 7 years of writing code first, so like development-driven tests rather than test-driven development, right? So I do have to admit that it's a muscle. Then you get better with practice, and then the first step is usually the hardest, and then it gets easier along the way. And if one advice that I can give is to start with the expected behavior of your application, just write the behavior. So relating to the technical interview question that I had, so this is what I came up with, right? So I literally just write what they need. So it's a tenant. So there's like 3 tenants. Tenant A should add 15% markup. This is literally the requirements that they have. So like add 15% markup, add $10 service fee, limit price to $1,000. And then tenant B doesn't have markup, has a slightly more expensive service fee. And then tenant C is sell based on price range. So price range is actually just like a tiered pricing, basically. So so I just write this, and then I start. So now my specs are red, right? And then I just write, like I said, I just write the simplest amount of code to actually make these tests pass. So like, for example, this is tenant A. I say should add 15% markup, add $10 service fee, limit price to 1,000, and you see that this is literally what I did here. I'm not trying to be clever or anything. It's just price times 15%, and then plus $10 service fee, and filter out the ones that are just select the ones that are below $1,000. Okay, so and then comes the red green refactor. Right now that the tests are green, you can actually start refactoring, and this is what I went with. So one of the requirements was to make it easier to configure for the tenants, and this is what I came up with. So just like, instead of each tenant having their own class and like hard coding the logics inside, I have like multiple different strategies so basically just composing different pricing strategies and filter into the basically the pricing formula, right? And then this can actually be translated into like serialized into like JSON or YAML or something, or be put into database, and then the tenants we can actually have a UI that read this, and then this can map back to all this code here. And how I came from this to this is simply just because I already have it green. So now I just make sure that my tests are always green. So these tests should always pass throughout my refactoring. So I know that it sounds like crazy because it seems like a total rewrite from the original code, right? But actually there are many small steps in between, just like move one thing at a time, and every time I move something small, I make sure that I run the test, and it's green and it's green and it's green, just until I get to this point. So yeah, I cannot show you the middle steps, but that's actually what happens here. And there's actually a name for this. It's called outside in TDD. So I didn't know that this was outside in TDD. I only learned it later after I've actually tried this the first time. So outside in TDD is basically you start from way top, right? So it's acceptance testing, like how I described the behavior of like what I expect the system to do. Like acceptance testing, integration test, and kind of like work your way down. And as you work your way down, you repeat that red green refactor at the lower level. So like these are the classes that I created. So these are all created with TDD as well. So let's just write the specs for one class, and then try to integrate back to the original code one by one. So yeah. And yeah, so one thing I realized after this first endeavor is that TDD is actually about defining contracts, because it was hard to understand how people can do this, because we always think about like how do you write tests before you write code, right? But it's actually not writing tests, it's actually writing the specifications of your application rather than like a specific test or something. So like what I did just now, it's actually the behavior of your system, and it's not actually testing a particular method or something, right? So again, this I would like to reiterate this advice. If you would like to start this, like start with defining how your application should behave. That's actually clearer, because if you're trying to think ahead, like what kind of methods and classes you will have, then it's gonna be a bit hard to start. So just define the application behavior and just move from there. Yeah, so I was writing tests before this, like with the development driven testing. I write tests based on the implementation details, right? So if I have like some methods, and then I say describe this method, and then it should do this, should do this. But then now I actually write down the behaviors, and then I implement the behaviors. So that's the kind of like the mindset shift that I notice. And the second endeavor is a bit more interesting. It's a slightly larger project, and it's not. So the first one was kind of like a web service, like it's very common. So the second one is actually a web scraper project. So I have this web scraper project that I basically just create TradingView stock screener. So this is how it looks like. So basically, just like I have a certain way to screen my stocks. And then I would like to be notified every time, because I don't have time to check. So this is like a web scraper project running on cron job. So yeah, so I'm using Puppeteer, and I did it once. So I did it before without any tests. So the development flow is basically you code the Puppeteer to log in to TradingView, and then go to the screener page, and then make sure that everything like all the panels are active and everything. And then you scrape the table that you saw just now, and then go to the Telegram bot and notify the stocks, right? And the development experience for this was really, really terrible, because so for example, like when I get to here, I actually cannot test this without having to watch my Puppeteer log in and going to the screener every time. So once I get here, I want to like get here, like code this part. I have to make sure I have to always sit and watch my my Puppeteer just basically running, logging in every time. I'm surprised that TradingView doesn't flag my account or something. Yeah, I logged in like probably 1,000 times before I can get to here. So development experience is terrible. And so this was developing on my local, right? And it was even worse when I deployed this on DigitalOcean, because on my local machine, Google kind of recognized my device and everything, right? But then when you put this on DigitalOcean, it's a totally new machine. There's a reCAPTCHA, and I cannot actually reproduce this on my local. And it was really terrible, to the point that I actually gave up just fixing this issue. So I attempted rewriting this project, but then I also add one more feature, basically. So I want to also do forward testing. Forward testing, just in short, I don't want to go into like stock stuff here, but forward testing is basically you try to basically buy fake buy the stocks, and then see in 2 weeks whether you actually hit the target or not. Basically, that's the whole gist of forward testing. So I want to use TDD here, and this project is not yet completed, but I have enough to actually kind of like report my experience on using TDD for this. But I'm not sure yet, like how it will turn out. But I have most of the things ready, I think. So like I said, basically just start with the behavior of your application, right? So like I said, I want to have forward testing. So I have to have this application enter the trades, right? So and there are some behaviors here that retries when login fails, just to make sure. Retries, and then if there are stocks in the screener, then save the screen stocks in the database. Then so this one is just generating just a private method. So and you can see that it's a bit this is like, I noticed that, hey, I can actually now start from here, which is the most important part of the application, right? So the reason is because with the tests, you can actually define the contract to say that, hey, script is going to return me an array every time. So I can actually start implement the stuff here with the knowledge that my scraping service in the future, when I code it, will have this array of stocks returned, right? So I can start from the end of the part, and which I would argue the most important part of the application. And this involves multiple things like saving the database, calculate position, calculate risk and reward, and calculate trading fees. All of them are done with TDD as well. So they have like separate modules basically to um, sorry, to kind of calculate, make sure that everything is in place. So you notice that I've got to mention that this is actually a TypeScript project. So it's not actually a Ruby project. I guess I mentioned it because I said I was using Puppeteer. Okay, so and this is another thing that I observed. Like it can shorten your feedback loop, and I can start where it matters most, like I said just now. When I need something that is non-existent, define a contract, and this is hard to do otherwise without TDD, or at least it's not very obvious, I think, because because now you are starting with the behavior of your application, and you can assume some behaviors. So this is the contract part, right? And it's just more obvious with TDD. I'm not saying that you cannot do it without TDD. I think you can. It's just a test, right? In the end, you can actually still write tests to kind of actually, can you? I'm not sure. Maybe cannot. But it's not as obvious if you're not doing TDD. And so this is the part that I was mentioning. So I mop the dependencies to TradingView, and then I assume that when I do fast screen stocks, this is not implemented yet, by the way, that it will return an array of stocks, right? And then I can save that to the database and assert that it's properly saved. And then so where is my cursor? Okay. So another thing is dealing with change in TDD. So this is as I was developing this, I realized that I have a new requirement. I want to forward test with multiple configuration, right? So risk to reward ratio is basically like how much you want to cut loss and how much you want to take profit, basically. So I want to try different risk to reward ratio and like perform analysis on that. So now I have to change because I've already developed my enter trade service without any regards to this configuration, right? And now I have to introduce this. And at first it was kind of a bit awkward because it felt like you kind of have to know the requirements, everything beforehand. Then it will be easier to do TDD because you're describing the behavior, right? So at first it was a bit awkward, but then I just just wing it. And I realized that, hey, I have a new behavior. So I have a new contract. I update the specs and then update the code. So, and you can see that now, so if I want to compare, I hope this is not too small. Okay, so there's enter trade service here only accepts mock trading view at this point, right? And here I updated it to now accepts an account, and account have all the configuration like trading fee or risk percentage or like the risk to reward ratio and stuff like that. So, and I just update the specs and then update the code, and it's that simple. And I want to stress this, and I feel like if you have one thing you want to take away from my talk today is that TDD is about defining how your application should behave, and that's it. And then just implementing the code to make sure that your application behave like you want it to behave, right? So, and the other thing is, I think types help with defining contracts, because I mean types or like interfaces are kind of contracts anyway, right? So it's one thing that I wish Ruby has. So I'm doing this project on the side, and I'm doing Ruby at work, right? So I kind of keep switching back and forth. And I felt like every time I go back to Ruby from like doing my TypeScript project, and I wish Ruby has this. I don't know if that counts as implementation details, because like the point about TDD is like defining behavior without the coupling of implementation details, right? But I'm not sure if types like the way I use interfaces in this project is consider implementation details, but I don't know, it helps. And I don't think you have to be strict about implementing your TDD, because like some TDD schools have like very opinionated way of doing things, but I don't think you have to kind of conform to them. You have to learn everything as well, and then just like pick whatever works for you, which is going to be a point later as well. So now that I have the forward testing part, then I go log in, and then I go to screener. I have not implemented this software capture yet, but I have an idea of how to do it. How to do it right. I just assume some behaviors, and then like assume a contract, and then work on the software capture code based on that. Yeah, and then you can see that this is the login specs. So just Cora logs in, returns true when logged in, and doing this, I don't actually have to watch my Puppeteer um, login every time anymore, because like I can just log stuff. So this is the part where what was it? Where I go to the screener, right? So I get the screens. So this is describing the crawler trying to get the screen stalks. Then navigate successfully, retry, check if screener window is active, check if the column set is active, infinitely load all the screen stalks so that when you parse the table, you get everything. And now you can go to script, which is scraping that table down there. Right? So we have that parse screener rows, and then return the screen stalks. And so you can see that I developed all this behavior without actually installing Puppeteer yet. So I'm already at this point. I haven't installed Puppeteer yet. And this is a huge contrast compared to how I was doing things before, where I was looking at my Puppeteer login like 1,000 times. And the way I do it is actually again, just I assume that this Puppeteer, when I have it in the future, it will behave a certain way. So I just define the contract, mock the dependencies right now, which is the trading view scraper, the real Puppeteer. Just define the contract, and then develop my behaviors, like application behaviors based on that. And if we look at this, for example, this like parse screener rules here, and you can see that these are the stuff that I need, like the behaviors of Puppeteer that I expect in order to be able to scrape this stocks, right? So I need like wait for network idle, I need scroll for the infinite scrolling, and then I need like get tags, like because I need the number of stocks that are matching. Then I get the count of elements, and then get tags in the cells in the table. So this is all the robot functions that I mock, and then I expect. So these are the contracts basically, right? And then based on that, I call the stock screener crawler, and then just expect that in the end it will get this. So this is the array that I expect to be returned by this service, and then this array is going to be what will be fed into the enter trade service that we have earlier on, where it's just expecting an array of stocks, right? And again, types help here because I know that I've already defined the kind of data structure that I need during the enter trade service, and then I just make sure that this parse screener rows return the same type, right? So types help here to kind of like make sure you don't shoot yourself in the foot. So yeah, just reiterating my points. TDD kind of shortens your feedback loop based on this, because you can mock the undefined behaviors of your application, then work on these expectations, and then again, TDD is about defining contracts, and types help with defining contracts. Okay, so this is the interface that I have, where this is basically the mock robot, right? So these are the stuff that I need to make sure that I can parse the screener rows. and you can see that it's actually literally repeating the APIs of Puppeteer, and like Puppeteer has click, and this one has click. This one has like, okay, so like fill form is used in like when you're trying to log in. Like navigate to Puppeteer has that as well. Wait for network idle, Puppeteer has that as well. So it's kind of repeating the APIs of Puppeteer, and this is what's kind of like the downside of TDD that I think I can think of, because as you are developing this, you kind of introduce an abstraction layer on top of Puppeteer, and kind of repeat stuff. And I'm not sure if it's good or if it's bad. And based on my readings, that people actually come across this as well. So it helps with prototyping, because you can just define this interface like very like shallow contract, and then just mock the return behaviors, the return the outputs of these, and just work from there, right? But then it is introducing another indirection, basically, because instead of like working directly with Puppeteer, you have this like middle layer that I'm not sure is helpful or necessary or not. But so it will be helpful if I need to switch away from Puppeteer. So let's say I haven't implemented the Puppeteer part in this project yet, but let's say once I do, and then maybe I want to move to like something like Playwright, for example. I can just re-implement those Playwright functionalities inside this, like make sure that it's actually returning the same thing based on this contract, right? And then everything is done. But it's very unlikely that you will actually change something as core as that, like that library. So I'm not sure if this is good or bad. I'm not sure. But as you can see, that I arrived here because of TDD. So it actually, one of the questions that I had earlier was, can this actually help me with software design? So the answer is it can affect my design, but I'm not sure if it's necessarily in a good way, because indirection hell is also a problem in a code base, right? So if you have like multiple smaller objects, you have to actually just go. So you want to know something, you have to jump multiple small classes to understand the whole behavior. That's actually very, very annoying as well. So this is actually, so initially I was doing outside in with my first TDD experience. This one is called inside out TDD. So basically it focuses on a single entity or a set of behaviors, and then just work your way to the top, right? So right now I start with one functionality and then move to the other, and the problem is there's a risk of entities not interacting with each other correctly. So there's no guarantee that when I start implementing Puppeteer for real, that all of my assumed behaviors are going to be correct. And then the other one is risk of creating too many small classes to indirection hell, which like what we said earlier. And so this is like outside in and inside out TDD, right? And both have its own pros and cons. So for example, like outside in TDD, it works for small requirements, or like for example, like my technical interview tests from earlier. But if you're trying to build something big, it's quite hard to actually figure out like the whole thing that you need in the because you're at the top layer, right? So and then inside out TDD might actually makes more sense, but it will actually have the risk of like what I mentioned earlier, where you get a lot of small classes, which I've experienced myself, and that, or you have a risk of things not integrating well, which I have also experienced at work due to inside out TDD. So I'm not sure which one is best, and I think the chances are I'm gonna need both, and like suit my use cases, right? So but figuring out which is best at which time is always a constant struggle when I develop with TDD at work. So I don't know about affecting software design, but it definitely affects the way I write tests. And then after a while, I realized that it's actually like, so for example, like this is the stock screener crawler where you actually parse the screener table. And to be honest with you, if I was doing driven development tests, like, developing the code first and then writing the test, I would probably have something like this, where I have the class name and then all the methods that are there, and then like have all the behaviors in there. So that's like coupling your test with the implementation details. And like once you rename this, like for example, you rename navigators to screener to something like something else, and then you have to also update your test and stuff like that. But it because I start with TDD, and I start with the behaviors, and then my tests are actually becomes like this now. So it like more behavior driven and less implementation details driven, because I don't know the implementation details upfront, right? So I cannot actually write put implementation details in here anyway. So I continue TDD at work, flip-flopping between inside-out TDD and outside-in TDD. So inside-out TDD guides my design, of course. And then, but then it also leads to the risk of having all this small cluster indirection. So like some clusters are like in hindsight. So for example, when I do this at work, and I revisit that code again, it's like maybe this thing can just be a private method instead of a full-blown class. But then because I was using TDD, so it kind of like guides me there, but it's probably not the best thing. I also do outside in TDD, but then it's like I said, it's sometimes quite hard to set up the entirety of the acceptance test, right? So yeah, so I also learned a new trick that I'm not sure good or bad. So let's say I have a behavior. So now what I do is I start with an empty class, right? And then I write the pseudocode. Basically, the pseudocode becomes like the end goal, the readable code end goal that I want the class to have. And then I declare empty private methods for those stuff. I'll show an example later. And then I use .send inside my test to TDD these private methods. So I'm developing this private method behaviors, which is I know that usually you don't test private methods, right? But then I use this trick to kind of like just build something from the ground up and then combine the smaller test to create the acceptance test later. So for example, I have this class called generate report, right? And so what I did is, so let's say the thing needs to get some issues on a specific date, and then needs to get the records of those issues, like the real data of those issues, right? And then you need to, let's say, upload to S3 or something. I think there's an incomplete image here or something that I'm really sorry about that. But yeah, so supposedly there's a okay, never mind. So basically, there's a missing image here. So sorry about that. So in my real class, this is actually a class just called generate report, and then it has get issues on date, and then get the return of this, and then get the issues records based on these issues, and then generates the report and then upload to S3, right? So I basically write those pseudocode first, and then create empty private methods, and then I use .send, because .send you can actually test private. You can actually call private methods, but using .send. This is specific to Ruby, by the way. Anyway, it's a Ruby meetup, so I guess everyone knows. So yeah, so I basically just start building the behavior based on these private methods, and in the end, I basically consolidate everything and build the acceptance test, and then I decide if these private methods should be their own class. So let's say those private methods become too big, and then maybe I can extract the test and the private method out to a specific class. If not, and then I remove the tests that are testing the private method and just leave the final acceptance test, because I mean they are being tested by the final acceptance test anyway. So and the reason I did this is to avoid the inside out TDD dictating the what classes I have, right? So if I do inside out TDD, I will probably come up with like 5 different classes. But then I do this, I do everything in one class first, and then I refactor later. The trick is to call these private methods, and it also results in a kind of readable code because you write the pseudocode based on. So basically, your call method, um, the call method only has like a small stuff, and then everything else is hidden behind the private methods, right? So it's very readable. But then you also don't risk of like creating these like small little classes from inside out TDD also. So, and this is another point that I want to highlight as well. So as you pick up TDD, make the process your own. And this is me making this TDD process my own, right? So I figure out like there's a limitation on inside out TDD, but it's still helpful. So I don't want it to go and guide me to create those little classes. So I do everything in one class, but it's just that prime method, and then I evaluate if I want to refactor later. So um, yeah, so nobody says you have to be a 3D purist. A 3D purist, they will always encourage you to do unit tests. And as you can see, I don't actually just do unit tests. I also like hit the database and everything like that. So, but then you would want to understand the end goal of TDD and make the process work for you while still achieving that goal. And this applies to all software engineering methodologies as well, like agile and everything. Like it's like, you know, if you go on Twitter, people kind of like argue about stuff like between purists and kind of like pragmatic people. But I think just just make it work for you. Like take the pure version, refine it to just like fit your circumstances basically. Okay, so I'm nearing the end. So these are some other observations or like lingering questions. So again, this is just my 7th month doing TDD. So there are some observations. So like one thing that I realized is like if you want to do TDD efficiently, you really need to know how to write tests and what your test runner is capable of. Because if not, then it will be slower to write those tests, right? Because you don't know like what kind of matches are available. So for example, RSpec is very good at that. Like you have a ton of matches that are really make sense. But then if you start using like something like Jest, for example, it's very rudimentary, I think, compared to RSpec. So there's this paradox, right? So if you want to do TDD very well, you need to know how to write tests. But then if you don't know how to write tests, you cannot do TDD. So it's kind of like which one starts first? Like because for me, in my case, I already know how to write tests from 7 years of experience, right? So when I move to TDD, I know how to write those tests first. But then if I'm a junior that doesn't know anything, this is gonna be a bit hard. So I think one remedy that you can do is pair up, and this is actually part of the extreme programming movement as well, right? So you always do stuff in pair programming. And the other guy, so if you're pairing with the senior, that senior knows how to write tests and then just kind of like guide you and introduce you to like the world of writing tests. So the projects that I have been dealing with doesn't include front end. So my project at work doesn't actually have any front end at all. So we're just dealing with Sidekick and API, very little APIs, so mostly Sidekick workers. I'm not sure yet how hard it is going to be. Again, it's a muscle. I'm going to need some practice. And again, you need to have an idea on how to write those tests in the first place, right? So like if you are writing like a Vue, you're using Vue framework or React framework, you need to know how to test those things, like where you want to, what kind of renderer you want to use, for example, like shallow renderer, whatever. Yeah, but kind of have to kind of learn how to write those tests. And how do I start in legacy code base? To be honest, I'm not sure because I don't have experience with that, right? So if you have a legacy code base with shitty tests, I'm not sure like how much you can do this. Like my experience, the web scraper project is a brand new rewrite. And then at work, our team has a strong testing culture. So so it helps with me doing TDD with my team's code base, right? So for example, like this is one of the projects that my team handles. So you can see that it has like 10,000 tests, and that kind of gives you confidence, and like everything is well tested. So you can actually, if you want to do TDD here, then it's gonna be easier, right? Yeah, we're hiring, by the way. So you're like, if you want to be in a place where you have confidence when shipping out stuff, this is a place to go because you have like a lot of tests here. Yeah, the other thing is our technical requirements, right? Should they be part of the behavior? So for example, like when an error happens, log the error. This is technical requirements. They are not user facing. Or we are unwrapping a long DB transaction within a monitoring call. Should you? So previously, when I was doing development driven tests, so I would probably like make sure that this gets called. Like for example, um, you have a long DB transaction, then you make sure that this monitoring method gets called, right? I'm not sure if that because you're using TDD, then you're describing just the behavior of the application, but I'm not sure if technical requirements should be that as well. Yeah, so for paginating your query, so let's say you do like a normal query, get everything, and then you want to start doing pagination. Should you include that as part of the behavior? I'm not sure. The other thing is integration tests are actually pretty fast. So I include this point because there's an article from DHH from 2014 saying that TDD is that long-lived testing, and one of the complaints in this is that so the TDD purists always emphasize on writing unit tests for this, right? And instead of like the whole system tests, like integration tests, you don't want to hit the DB. You want to have anything that's you don't want anything that's slow. But then actually integration test is not that slow. Even if you hit the database and you don't actually notice the difference that much, I think, in human terms. If you compare like milliseconds, of course, there's going to be a difference. But in my experience, it doesn't affect me that much. And so these are the two beefs that he has with TDD. And it's also something that I experienced. So unit testing to guide your design sucks because like, this is, I think, inside out TDD. And then he lets active record hits DB, and I also do that as well. Yeah, so the idea is like you don't have to do unit tests. You don't have to do TDD just with unit tests. You can also do integration tests. Hit the DB is fine. If your integration tests are slow, then buy a new machine. So okay, so conclusion. Afif, I'm not sold on TDD. That wasn't the point of this talk. This is an experience report, just sharing my experience basically. And I've only done this for like 7 months, and there's a lot more things going that I'm going to experience in the future. But yeah, so like I said, you have to understand like why people try to introduce TDD in the first place, right? You want to write good tests, and good test means that you want to make sure that these tests fail first, and then you write something that can make it successful, right? Because I've seen tests that you mock the hell out of it to the point that even if you delete the code that is testing, the test actually still pass because everything is mock, and then you're testing back that mock. I'm not sure if you have experience with this, but I definitely have in production code. So just delete code, and test is still pass because everything is testing against mock. So TDD, because of the red-green refactor thing, this is not going to happen, or more unlikely to happen, I guess. I'm not sure if it's going to happen, but it's a lot more unlikely to happen because you have to make sure that your test goes to red first, right? And then you make it green. So yeah, what you should strive for instead is writing good tests. And that doesn't actually require TDD, but TDD can definitely help you with that, and at least in my personal opinion. And that's it. I think I ran over for like 10 minutes. Sorry about that. I'm not sure if we still have time for Q&A.
I guess we could do a quick one if there's any questions from those watching through YouTube, or anyone in Hive Kind Office, or anybody at all have questions. Bobby can have 5 minutes to see if any question comes in. But yeah, thanks Afif for the talk.
No questions?
I do have one because you mentioned about the abstraction, right? And where the way they usually get this uh, with the power ports, for example. Sorry, because I'm hearing myself. I don't know where it's coming
Um,
from.
it's a bit muffled for me though.
There's
Can
an
you guys
echo. I'm
hear
not sure which.
Tristan as well?
Better now? Is it?
Yeah, let me switch
Yeah.
around. Yeah.
Yeah, so like in power ports, like the way I see it usually is like through power ports. Like for example, here in the office, we have this air conditioner on the ceiling, and it's directly wired into the electricity. There's no abstraction in between that because it's a permanent installation compared, for example, to our laptops, which are very portable, and so you would like to have um, something that's not proprietary to that laptop. Like you have Type C is preferable to something like, let's say those Lenovo type chargers that it's not even a barrel plug. You can't find. You have to be specifically doing it like that. So I guess it's at least that's the way. I don't know if this is the way you see it as well, because you mentioned that you don't know if whatever you did was correct or not wrong. I think it's on the robot thing. Uh, because I was also looking at the MacBook chargers. Like before the MagSafe chargers, it was directly connected into the power adapter. Whereas now with the Type C chargers in the Mac, you have a cable and you have the power adapter, and it can be interchangeable. I don't. Maybe we can ask the same thing: is it a good thing or a bad thing? Because
Mm-hmm.
the Type C is a separate purchase from the power adapter. The power adapter is just a power adapter. Right? It's more expensive, but you have the opportunity to change things. I guess is that the way you would look at it?
Yeah, so I understand that it will make it easier for me to change in the future, but sometimes as you traverse back to those code, it's very hard to navigate and stuff, right? So uh, it's annoying, I guess, but and I was wondering if this can be just private method in the top level class, right? So instead of being a specific class on its own. But yeah, I'm not sure. Maybe in the future, let's say I actually need to change that, and then maybe I'll see that hey, it's actually not unnecessary at all. Maybe it's actually something that makes sense. It's just that I don't know it yet because I haven't had a requirement to change it, right? But yeah, again, I agree with you that it's easier to change when I need to change, but sometimes it's not obvious whether this will require change in the future or not. Like maybe this will not change ever, or very unlikely to the point that maybe it doesn't need to be a separate abstraction. Um, yeah.
Okay.
So like I said with puppeteer thing, um, like it's very unlikely for me to change to something else because I'm already familiar with puppeteer, blah blah blah, and puppeteer is well maintained anyway. So like I don't see a use case where I would switch that, but then TDD still leads me to actually creating an abstraction, which is good, but I'm not sure if that's needed. Yeah, am I making sense?
No, yeah, all good.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Right. Do we have
Questions
any? Yeah. Any other
from
questions?
chat? We don't have any.
I don't. Yeah. There's no questions from YouTube. I guess we can kind of end this session then. Thanks, Afif, so much for your time.
Mhm.
All right. How
All
do you
right.
want
Feel
to
free
do
to
it?
stay around, or you can drop off the call and watch on YouTube. It's up to you.
We can
Uh,
plug this in.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to drop. I'll watch on YouTube later.
no worries. Thanks for
Thanks.
joining us once again, Afif. See you.
All right. Bye bye.
It's
Okay.
just that you can't hear.
Oh, we
Like
can
the
hear
way.
that?
Yeah, because you have to show. Are you on StreamYard right now?
I'm not. Do I have to be on stream?
Yeah, you have to be in StreamYard so that the online viewers can see your presentation.
Sure.
No, it is correct.
Yeah, it's not fun.
Okay.
Yeah.
You don't want us.
I don't want that to be
seeing
streamed.
that
Yeah.
thing. All right. Sorry, we're setting things up here.
Yeah, I mean, for those of you who don't know, the next talk is refactoring routes.rb by Has, which they're preparing right now. So hopefully we'll get into that quite soon.
This is searching for signal.
Actually, why do I need to put it here?
So that we can see this.
Oh, we can see this. Yeah. All right.
I mean, we can just take a look at
We
your
can.
screen as well.
Oh, no, if we put this, wouldn't that show up here? Wouldn't what I'm
It
streaming?
will be a bit delayed, but if you
Oh, yeah, sure.
okay.
If it's delayed, then no problem. All right. Okay.
Well, not as delayed as YouTube. Actually, it's fine.
That's all right.
It might be better if
Yeah.
you do it like that. Yeah, let's do it like this.
Sure.
But you do it on StreamYard. That's actually a good idea. Now we can see it like this. Are you fine?
Can you guys hear me?
I'll mute this.
No, it's not gonna work. Just mute mine.
Which mic are we using?
Yeah, I'll turn this on. And you need yours.
Sorry, mute.
Yeah, the microphone as well. All right. Okay. Good. Can you say
I should mute
something?
my microphone.
No, because the speaker is different, and it's the noise cancellation doesn't work as well because it's the gate. But can you speak and then see if they can hear us?
Hey guys, can you hear me? What happened? All right, cool. Can you see my screen then?
No. Now,
No, you can.
can someone put on the screen? Are you sharing your screen?
All right.
There's nothing on the screen. Like he's sharing, but nothing showing up.
Here
Oh,
you
yep,
go.
we got it.
Yeah. I think if I play, it doesn't show. Stop sharing.
Oh, you're using the new Mac. This is what
Yeah.
I was talking to you about.
Because like as soon as I do that, it doesn't allow me to. All right. I can do this, guys.
Can you share his screen, Gui?
Yep.
Yeah, there you go.
All right.
That works.
All right, should we start? Yeah, should we start this?
In the,
Go ahead. The floor is yours.
All right. Good evening, everybody. Thank you for coming here. This is the first meetup that we're doing in person. It's a lot less people than I imagined it was going to be, but yeah, here we are.
so we have 6 people online.
We do. We have a lot more people going. So actually, on the previous talk, I just wanted to mention, I don't know if you remember this, Tristan, but somewhere around 2013, in one of the earliest meetups, right after the meetup, I came across to the restaurant across the street, the bar across the street, if you remember that. And I had my laptop out. I was just like, hey, Tristan, can you show me how to test this thing? And yeah,
That was some time ago.
that was a long ass time ago. Yeah, but I had a testing question, and then you showed it to me. You were having a burger, and you're on the other hand, but you were like. So thanks for that. And I don't know if you remember it, but yep. But so I've been trying to give a talk for a while now, and I haven't thought of what to do. A while ago, I gave a talk called Refactoring Schema RB. So I was like, all right, I know what to do. Refactoring routes RB. Here we go. Back. Okay, what is this talk? This talk is a look at some possible ways for you to improve application routing, because I generally believe it is the most vital part of your application, because this is how your application starts. This is the entry point to your application. This is where it begins. So we want to be always improving it. So the second thing is we want to be more familiar with the tools that we have. Rails provides you a lot of tools, and I don't think we use them all the time. So let's take a look at some of that. And also maybe a nudge just for you to think about what
what can I do different with routing, or what can I do to improve my current routing and future routing, of course. What is this talk? Is it? So it's not a one-size solution. So like, not everything I'm going to show here is just going to be immediately applicable to your application. So you got to like take it and choose and see what works for you. This is not a guide on how to clean up your controller, but it is an initiation in that way, because like routing and controls are obviously extremely aligned together. So, but this is going to be able to help you think about cleaning up some of your controllers. And also, this is not a full guide to everything routing. It's a very big topic, and we'll see. And there's even more to dive into. All right, quick one. We're going to go through a series of examples on how do you start cleaning up your routes. All right, so the most obvious one, only define routes you're using. You always come in to an application and you look at it, and there's 1,000 and thousands of lines of routes that these are all applicable, but not all of them are reachable. So there's this concept called an unreachable route, where you have a route, but then you have a method in your controller, but no route goes to it. So that is an unreachable method. And also you have a route that does not link to any method. So this is an oversubscribed route. So only use and define the controllers that you're going to use. And of course, there is a gem that helps for you to figure out what are your unused routes and what are your unreachable action methods. This is usually an indication of some dead code in the application, especially in the unreachable action methods. So either this is also a good time not to just clean up your routes, this is also a good time to clean up some of your controller actions. All right. This is one of my favorite things. Like, we've spoken about this in quite a few different meetups, but like splitting your routes. Before Rails 6.1, this was not a default, but now this is default behavior within the application, where you are able to split your routes based on whatever you want it to be. So you don't have to have one giant config routes file. Now you can split it into multiple smaller ones, and usually this is split based on behavior, but you can choose whatever type of tactic to do if you want to do that type of thing. So like in here, you can see like there's an application. This is just for everything in general, but then like maybe you have an admin section, an API, and you can also do if-else logic in here, just because the routes file is just another RB file. So like you can do whatever you want. So like if you have particularly dev routes, maybe something to your design system or anything to your blah, blah, blah in your local. So like you want to be able to do that. So then you don't want to expose that in production or anything like that. So you can also do this here, same as anywhere. So this is just method calls. All right. Very, very important feature, nesting your routes. So route nesting is one of the most useful things that we have when building your routes and building your applications. A lot of the times there are resources that interconnect with one another. So in this example, there are orders, and one order is related to a payment. And a payment cannot exist without the order, because that wouldn't make sense in the context of this application. So it does make sense if you want to be able to say, hey, show me all of the payments for this order. So I go to this order, the ID, and the list of all the payments. That's all well and good. And then when I want to create and do any type of CRUD action towards it, I can just nest it with that order ID, and then I know that this resource belongs directly to this other resource. Okay, but there's a problem. Once you start nesting a lot of your resources, you're going to have gigantic flows and really long ideas of like, this is a blog post with a comment, and this comment has a reply and everything like that. So you wouldn't explicitly always want this. So there is a fix for this. So you don't want deeply nested routes all the time. So you have a thing called shallow routes. What is a shallow route? So the big difference here, if you take a look at these generated routes, in the first 3 lines, it is still related to that order. So that when we want to create a payment, it is still connected to that order. If we want to list the list of payments related to that order, that also works just as good. But when we want to view a singular payment, it is not exactly related to that order anymore. We can view it in the context of its own self. All right, so we do not need the route to be so deeply nested. All right, so we can use this concept of the shallow route. So this is where, yep, go ahead.
Is this similar to like the previous example? You have a nested,
Exactly.
and you just bring out resources payments as a separate.
Exactly, like it's exactly the same. But then now you don't have to. If you want to view a specific payment, you don't have to have the URL where the order is there as well. So you can view it on its own. So imagine another example is like if you have a blog post where you want to look at a specific comment. So I can just share that comment. I can just have a route that goes directly to that comment without the contents of the post. Yeah. So this is entirely helpful. The idea is, this is not a hard and fast rule, but usually you would not want to even nest more than 3 levels. That is, beyond 3 levels, you're just way too deep in there. And then you want to take a look at some shallow routing. So this is what shallow routing does. All right, so this one, we also covered this in many different meetups, but it is one of my go-to ideas. It is that custom resources are better essentially than custom actions. So if you have a concept or a controller for payments, and then like you want to introduce refunds, instead of like defining singular routes that go, and create custom actions for each one, where you have like a new refund, another refund, and the refunds, maybe we can go ahead and look at a nested route, so a nested resource. So this will just take care specifically of the refunding. So like now we have taken the concept of a refund out of the payment, and we have like brought it into a top level idea within the app. So again, this is also a good way for you when you're looking at your routes file. Do I have a lot of these methods springing up every single where? And then like, is there something in here that I can try to extract into another resource? Is there a concept here that I'm not looking at? So usually there is the suffix prefix idea. So like if you have new underscore refund, like why isn't it refund new? Just like, so like maybe this is an indication that there's a little bit more for you to look at just from the context of your routes RB. All right, so that was about some cleanups. And so now we're going to talk about specific features of your routing class, route constraints. So what is a route constraint? We can create context for routing. So we can have the route for orders, but we don't want it to be everywhere. So we want a specific route in the context of the API. So this is what is called as a request constraint. So like based on the request that comes in, we try to constrain on these individual routes only exist in this constraint, under this condition, under this resource. So in this one example, this is really quick to say, like when the subdomain of the application is API, so imagine api.example.com, these are now valid routes. So if you have, just like v1/orders, and then the subdomain is not API, that's not a valid route to begin with. So like this is going to increase the chances of you surfacing top-level concepts and constraints within your routing. All right, so this is a little bit more pushing that same idea. So instead of just going and passing a specific API method, so like the param, so what you can do instead is that you can accept a proc. So the constraint method can accept a proc or a lambda, and this will give you the request object. So for every single request object, you can evaluate it as you are going through the routes. So in this example, I'm trying to figure out if the user is viewing this application through Chrome. All right, so just a very simple regex where I'm matching Chrome. And if you look at the picture right below that, the top level browser is Chrome, and below that is Safari. But because this constraint says only when the user agent matches to Chrome, this is not a valid route in Safari. So you can go ahead.
What's the advantage of this versus like a before action in the controller?
Sure. So like say for an example, if you have routes maybe specifically for like a turbo, like a mobile. So like you just want specific ones for Android, you want specific ones for Chrome, for iOS, then you can keep them separate without having to do routing. And then now you can, without throwing 404, you can actually just let the routing handle 404s for you. So like you wouldn't need to specifically check before action if the user is doing this, if the user is doing that, where actually you can just check that into the routing
check
log.
even earlier.
Even earlier, way earlier in the in the call trace. So you want to do that. And also, if you're using Warden and by extension device, you can also have the current user available. So you can literally check if maybe the user is logged in, if the user is an admin. So you can do a lot of funky stuff in here. I wouldn't recommend it, but like you can do shit in here. All right, so this is another example, right? Same thing. So like based on the params, because this is the entire request object, so we can get the entire version of the params. So maybe we can do some basic or just like some naive feature flagging in this, or where we're like, hey, give us this route, but only if this is entered. So it's not the greatest example, but I was just trying to show you that you can have the entirety of the request object within the scope. So these are dynamic constraints, and you can also create custom constraints. So a custom constraint is any class that can identify or that can respond to the matches method. So the matches method in this example says like, hey, this is considered an unreserved subdomain. By the way, the context of this is that we have an application, it's a multi-tenanted application, and like clients can reserve a subdomain for their business. So like they will have tristan.example.com, they can have has.example.com. So, but then we want to be able to reserve some of these subdomains, maybe like API, hooks, help, support, any of those, like a couple of words. So then you can check on this. You can say like, as long as this is not these subdomains, we want to be able to draw these specific routes. So you can have as many or as little as you want. We have things for like Stripe, we have things for hooks, we have things for reserved subdomains, application admin, whatever you want it, you can create it. So this is something that you can do. So also where you add this file is entirely up to you. You can require it anywhere. All right, now we're jumping into the juicy stuff, route concerns. If this sounds a lot like controller or model concerns, because it is, so routes have their own concerns as well. In this example, we have two resources, orders and payments. In our application, we don't delete anything. So we just have the concept of archive, and once you archive, you can actually go on to do a second delete and delete, but then you can restore, you can unarchive, or you can view a list of all the archived records. And we've had this for every single one of our actions. So every single CRED action also has, like an archive where you can see a list of all the scoped archived records, and then you can also archive and unarchive, which is to restore. And this will be terrible to write if you have to write it every single place where you have a resource. So this is where route concerns come in. So you can create a concern, you give it a name. In this example, we give it archivable, and anything within there would automatically be added as a nested resource to this thing.
Which version is this?
This is available since 4. Yeah. So.
Never had to
Yeah, absolutely.
know.
Absolutely, yeah. This is the whole part of the talk. So like get to explore little things that we've never seen before, right? So you can create archivable, and you can name it whatever you want, but with Rust convention, you call it somethingable. And as you can see, like now we can have orders, and then they can be archivable, and payments can be archivable. And of course, this means that because there's an S with concerns, it means like you can accept multiple, and it does accept multiple concerns. So then you can create as many concerns as you want, but be careful, take it with a pinch of salt, don't go crazy, and you can pass it multiple concerns to every single one. All right, I said the concerns were the juicy part. I lied. Name, spacing, and scopes is where it's at. So this one is a tough one. Like I hate to ask it, but like, okay, does anybody have an idea what's the difference between a namespace and a scope? Just before we proceed this one. This is open to anybody in the chat or anything like that. It is a very subtle one, but sometimes you see one is used, you wonder why not the other, why not? So there is a difference. They both kind of do the same thing. You would use namespaces and scopes whenever you want to, one, nest the route within a certain namespace. You want to say like, hey, this is all the reports, and then go on to list the reports. So like, this is report/sales. So the reports in this example is not really a part of the route. There's no action or controller called reports, but it's a namespace. So I want to keep all the reports together, maybe all the settings together, all the admin bits together. So like I want to be able to use that. But we have two tools that we can use. One is namespace and one is scope. Namespace is the most common one. So let's take a look. So we have a namespace called API and a namespace called V1, and then the orders resource. So what does that give us? If you look at the middle where it says URI pattern, so this is the actual URL in the browser that somebody has to type. This is important. So API V1 is in that name. So you have to type it in the URL. And also the controller action also has this. But these are nested folders. So now you have a folder called API and inside of it called V1. And inside of that, there's an orders controller, and that's where you go. So the folders and the URL, they almost match. There is an overlap with how the URL looks like and how the folder structure looks like. This is where module differs. So where a scope differs. Let's take a look. So back to an initial example that we've had. We are using a constraint. We want, when somebody wants to use the API, we want them to go to api.example.com, but we also want to namespace it. We don't want to put just V1 in the controllers. What does that mean? We want a folder called API V1 and then orders controls, right? But now, if you actually look at the bottom, it says this is how somebody has to call it. They have to call it api.example.com/API/V1. But we already wrote API. We already know we're in the API. So how do we get to the point where we don't have to write API in the URL, but also have a folder called API? So obviously the answer is scopes. So this is what scopes do. So a scope is able to tell you, like you're able to tell it how you want it to nest in what folder structure. So now if we look at the definition, it says scope module is API, and then namespace V1 and resources orders. And if you look at the middle now, the URI pattern, it says V1/orders. It no longer says API V1 orders, but in the controllers, we still have the exact same thing that we were trying to do before, where we still have it under controllers, API, V1, and orders, but the user does not have to do api.example.com/API. So now we have we were able to shorten it. So how you try to structure your application and your controllers and your routes does not specifically have to be how the user sees it. We can do a lot of manipulation, and we will cover quite a bit of manipulation that allows us to keep the app in the way that we want it, but also to present it as nicely as possible. All right. So this is a scope with the module. We have to identify a module in there. All right. So this is going to be an example, interesting example. So a lot of multi-tenanted apps, what they do is that they allow you to reserve a subdomain. Tristan.example.com, and then you log in and then you see that application. Okay, but some applications don't have this. Basecamp is one of them. So what Basecamp does is that they have the version of the application, .basecamp.com, so that's like 3.basecamp.com/your account ID. So that in front, like right after the .com, is your account ID. So every single link, every single resource, every single thing that you click will have your account ID appended to it. So how does that work? Magic. Actually, so this is again where scopes come in to help. So like this is exactly what the second part of a scope does. So you can say, I have a variable. So now everything with this variable appended to it, okay, is going to be able to resolve to these routes. So within my scope, I have the account ID variable. Okay, so now every single time I do orders path, I have to pass in account ID. You know, so like this is the trick to get this to have multiple IDs within the same URL, and especially if you want to append the account ID to everything. But if you think about it, if you have to write orders_path and then pass in the account every single place, that's just going to be terrible. And you're going to forget about it, and then you're going to have a lot of dead links, blah, 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 blah. There must be a better way, and of course there is. So if you go into the controller and into the base controller, what you can do is you can override the method called URL options. So this is a method that is predefined within the application controller. And this is like a current account and authenticated, they just inherit from application controller. So every single time you call a link to, this will be called into it. All right, and what we want to do is we want to do a reverse merge. So if you already have an account ID, we don't override it. We only override it when it's blank. So, and this is what we're going to do. So every single time you call an option, a URL link, we will reverse merge it and append that account ID into it if we're within the scope of the current account ID. So this takes care of every single resource, every single path that needs this to be appended, and you will always have that ID appended. So if you look at that example at the middle, so that comment, it says app.example.com/1. So that's the account IDs. This is exactly how we get to what Basecamp has done with their account routing.
So when you use the controller helper,
Normal, like you just do it like normal. Like
and the URL helpers, you don't have to pass in
nothing. So like exactly. So like you do nothing differently, but this will just take care of this for you. All right. So now we've come to the more opinionated ideas. So like what constitutes a readable route? A lot of the times we try to neglect routes. If maybe like a few months ago, I had this debate with myself for a while because I read a comment online and somebody said like underscore routing, routes with underscores, it's pretty ugly. And I was just like, no, this is how we always do it. It's pretty. And then after a while, I kept thinking about it. I was just like, yeah, it's pretty ugly because it's always at the bottom of the thing. It doesn't read as easy because like the separation is at the bottom instead if it was at the middle. So just like, so again, it's very difficult to convert all your routes to like to use hyphens instead of underscores. But then again, what constitutes a readable route? How do you think about that? Does the user care about it? Do they care about it as much as we do? Probably not. But there is something to be said about having URLs that are readable. One thing about routes is that if you think about it in some states, in some examples, it is actually holding the state of the application. There is a lot of state that is being held. I'm looking at this page and I'm loading this record. That is state. This is what I've done. And then when I try to repeat this by refreshing the page or passing along for somebody else to do this, I am giving them a state of the example, of the application. I'm like, hey, look at this application in this current state. So it is pretty important for us to identify what constitutes as a readable route and what can be useful route. All right, so there are some ideas. All right, so the first one, this one, when we have resources, we can also have a resource, all right? So a resource is a singular version of a resources, okay? And the big difference is when you have a resource, you don't get the index action because there is nothing for you to list down. Like you're only going to be able to view it, So in this example, we have the Stripe Connect. There's nothing for you to list, but I want to create a new Stripe Connect for me to connect. And then I also want the create action, and also something like more obvious, the profile. So when I go to /profile, I don't want to pass the user's ID to say /profile/1. I don't need that, right? I can just say /profile, and I know you can only view your own profile, and that's about it. All right. So this is a singular resource. So that is the first thing that you want to do. You want to always be able to differentiate whether do I want a plural resource or a singular resource? And some of the times it's great that if you can just have a singular resource. But there is a big but in here. If you look at this generated routes, even though the URI in the middle it says /Stripe Connect /new, but then if you look at the controller action, it says Stripe Connects. So you still have to define a plural controller. And that's just pretty ugly, just like I want to be able to have this thing in my head where this route correlates with this controller. So what can we do about this? So if you can see even at the bottom, same thing, /profile, but then controller action and the controller name is profiles controller. And also in the folder name, that's just not going to do it, but lo and behold, there's a solution for it. You can specify a specific controller. Boom, now we have the exact control that we want. We can give it a name, okay? So this one is pretty cool. Second thing, all right, I love this one. So I work on a medical app, And then within this medical app, we have a lot of treatment notes. These are the notes that people come in to, you see a physician, and then they write some things about you. They were like, patient was very much in pain or something like that, right? All right, so, and then there's also the concept of a body chart. So a body chart is an image of a body, or maybe like a specific part of the body, the arm, the foot, the head, or whatever it is, and then they can draw on it to signify where you're at. All right, in this example, we have these two concepts. And in these two concepts, for both of them, there are templates. You have generated templates. So like when I see a patient that's coming in for a headache, I want to pull out this template really quickly so I can be able to treat them quicker. So maybe they have specific question types or anything like that, or like maybe the body chart, it has the picture. So now we have these really long ass names that says treatment notes, treatment note templates. You know, because then we have treatment notes and treatment note templates. And then we have body charts and body chart templates. And then in the URL, this looks pretty hideous where it says treatment notes / treatment note template. You know, not great. So do you think there's a solution? Of course there is. So you can just say path. So you can specify the path. So now nothing changes about the controller or how you define the route or anything like that. But it's going to look great. It's going to look treatment notes / templates, body charts / templates. Like it looks exactly like it is. And then now you don't have a conflicting namespacing within your application because you named it treatment note templates. You named it the full concept. But the users don't need to know that. We don't need to always match what the controller name is to the URL. We can be pretty crafty about it. So now we can just say templates, and this is always going to make sense. And once a user sees that, if you have a more power user, especially like with clinicians who use this every single day, a lot of them do type in the URL to go to pages, and then now they have memorized, all right, this thing / templates, this thing / templates, and then, you know, like it's more predictable for them instead of like really long names that may not be as obvious. Cool. So another one, the two-param. Whenever you pass the resource into a little two, all right, how does it know to generate the ID? It knows this because there's a method called two-param, and that method returns the ID. That's all it does. It just says two-param and then returns ID.
Inactive record.
Inactive record, yeah. So, and then what we can do here is that we can override this method and to do whatever we want. If you've ever been like, if you've ever used the gem called friendly routes or like friendly IDs, whatever it's called. It's called friendly IDs, right?
I think so.
Yeah. Yeah. So like this is what it overrides, where it generates a name and then it overrides the two-param. So now when you give it a resource and the link to calls resource dot two-param, now you can give it whatever name that you want. And then in this example, we have we have an application that has many different websites on it. So think of maybe like a website builder, or maybe you have your booking website, and then you have a list of websites on it. And now what we can do is we can, instead of passing in the ID to say like /website /1 /2 /UUID, now we can give it the domain name because we know the domain has to be unique. So this is a good candidate for an ID. All right, so this is exactly how we want our route to look like. It says like localhost 3000 /website /example.com. Looks perfect, looks great. Another example of that is that if you have username and then you want to do @ like has, and then you want to generate that username, so you can also do that. But there's a but, of course there's a but. Boom, as soon as we do this, what happens? We blow up. It says there is no route. Why is it no route? What is it about this thing that makes it think that there isn't a route? Because if you look at it, it says website / the ID that we gave it /edit. But why is there no route? So this one is a tricky one to figure out, and it's going to be hard unless you read the documentation or like stumble upon the solution by magically Googling a ton of shit. Whatever after a dot, Rails thinks it's the format of the request. Yeah, so like right now, it thinks that you're requesting some resource called website /example, and the format is .com/edit. So this is a pretty tricky situation because like every time you do is maybe something like order .json, and then that's the route, and then the format. Or maybe you do
Is there a clue on the error message?
No, there isn't.
Oh, there
No, there isn't, because so like I've actually removed something out here. So I've removed the dot from it just to prove to you that this would actually work if you didn't have the dot. All right. So like, but what we have is the top example. If it has the dot, no fucking idea. Okay, excuse my French. And yeah, so how do we fix this pesky dot problem? If we go back, we've already seen this. All right. We can have constraints on the parameter level. We can say this parameter match everything up until this next slash. All right, so you can be a little bit more verbose with it. If you have something like you want something.com that can only be, then you can match that as a regular expression. If you have a username that says @username, then you can also say like I want this ID to match this format. And if it isn't, it's an invalid route. All right, so at this point, this will fix the idea that we have the dot right behind it. All right, and then now we take a look and ta-da, now it works. Now we're back to the same problem where we had before, but with the dot. Now it knows that the full ID is the full domain name, which is example.com. But then again, now we're saying, if you look at line number 63, we're saying website.find ID. The name of the parameter is still ID, but it's not the ID, right? It is the domain, all right? So like right now it looks really, really ugly where we have to assume that the ID is the domain, but we don't want that. What we can do, again, come back to the routes file, and now we can say the parameter is called domain. It's not called ID. Okay, by default it's called ID on that first line, but now we change it and we say like, hey, for these resources of websites, the param that's always going to be used to identify one singular resource is called domain, and the constraint is that we want it to take anything up until the next /. All right, and this fixes it for us, and then now we can call find by and use the exact name that we wanted, because that's the actual concept that we're using. So you can change this to username, to ID. If you have maybe like some longer ID, you can use any of that you want. So, but then you can change the name of that param. Nothing in Rails is not configurable. This is what makes it so malleable and so powerful. All right, the other one. So like this one is one that I really love. All right, so we have a route. Okay, so like this is nested under reports, sales, and then we want the total sales. So we want it to look something like example.com/reports/sales/total. All right. Normally, what you would do is you want to filter by date. You want to start a date and you want an end date, so you want to be able to do that. And usually, how we also do that is that we pass it through the params in like the query params, where like you have a question mark and then whatever the query is. But Rails lets you do some mystical magic in here. So where we have optional params within the URL. So anything that is within the parentheses is a capture group that we want Rails to capture and actually set it into a param. All right. So if you look at that actually can match in 3 different ways. It can match if there's just /total. It can match if there's just /total from, and then /total from and to. So if you have a report and say like, hey, show me everything from the beginning of last year, that's valid, right? We just say anything up until today. And then if we also have a to, and then now we have full range. All right, but all 3 of them are now valid just because we have these optional params. So this is a very, very powerful concept, and like it's one of the ones that I see used least, but it is there for you to use it as much as you want. All right, I think this is the last one. We're right at the end. So we can translate routes. So routes, you can give it whatever name that you want, and you still don't affect the actual underlying application. You are still writing in English, but then your routes can be in whatever language. In this example, I've used like Malay. So you can say, like when you go to /category, you can say, oh, this is category. And then you can go /category/baru. So this is when you want to create a new resource. And then you can go /category/1/1 or whatever that you want. So the user will also see it in their URL in Malay. But if you look at the right side of it, it stays exactly as is. Nothing has changed in the controller, but now you can translate the routes. Your URLs look great, and then like your users are really happy, and also that is set, by the way, also with using a scope. So you can have multiple scopes where only define one at the top level, and everything inside will correspond to those action names. So you just need to define it one time. You don't need to define it for every single resource, but the path has to be changed for every single one. Yep. So this is the take back that I was hoping that everybody gets it. So what we want to do is we want to use a lot of namespacing. Like, this is not a hard and fast rule, of course, but I really love namespacing things in the application. Like I want very specific controllers that do very specific things, and they're all well organized within folder structures. I really like that. So use your namespacing to organize and clean up your routes aggressively, as aggressively as you want. I think I am hyper aggressive with this one. And also custom resources over custom actions. If your controller has a custom action, think about why do we have a custom action in here? Is there an idea that I want to extract? Is there an idea I want to promote to a top level idea within the application? And what can I do about that? And then now you can start to think differently. So if we just go back to the refund idea before, right? Before this, we just had it as a controller action. All right, just refund. But now maybe you say like, hey, maybe there is a resource within there that we want to, like extract out of this. Maybe I should be recording more of the details of the refund. Maybe there should be a refund record that I need to do. Who gave the refund? What reason did they refund for? How much did they refund? Did they refund the whole amount? Did they refund it with cash? Did they refund it by delivering a second product? It's just like, all right, so just by looking at these things, now we can try to explore a little bit further into, like what makes an action or what makes a resource. But this should be the hint. Anytime that you want to have a custom action, think about what and how can I make this into a custom resource. And the other thing is like keep your controls clean and concise, like small application controllers, small resource controllers that will always be preferred. And exactly, you want to explore Mower. So Mower is a typo, but you want to explore Mower routing ideas. So some things that I didn't cover in here are like polymorphic routes, which are amazing. There is a method called polymorphic URL where you start to pass different resources, and Rails will infer for you the the parameters and the URLs, which is really, really amazing. And also wildcard routing. So wildcard routing is that when you can have an asterisk and then you can take a subset. So you can also take that subset within the middle of the URL. So if you have, let's just say, a library and then whatever category. So you can say /library/ whatever the category is, and then /book ID. So then you can start to be able to ingest that category, but also at the same time have whatever value that matches. And you can do a lot with them. There's also the concept of resolve. There's a method called resolve that you can call on controllers, where given a different name, say somebody says like fancy word, right? So this word does not exist, but I want to treat it as if somebody called something else. So we can also do a resolution function. So that one is also some deep idea that you want to look into. I've taken a look at it. I don't think it's great for you. It's like, it's not that because it doesn't work great. I think it works perfect. But if you're there, if these are your ideas, I think maybe there's some more ideas that you want to change around your canonical routes. But yeah, feel free to take a look. And that's it. Tito finito. That's it. I would like to have any questions, please, on any type of routing concerns that you may have. Routing concerns, get it?
We have can you still hear us? Can we hear you? Okay.
Can you hear me? All right.
Yeah.
Yeah, nice. Has, I do have a question on like where you got your resources on like what does actually scope cover and namespace cover, or do you know because you've been working with all this?
Honestly, it's a bit of like a combination. There is, just like the idea where like over the last few years, I've tried to have new ideas around how I write applications, and a lot of them. But like it's not that I came up to them myself. It's just like I came to find the resources while I was looking for them. So just like it's really not just one resource. There's a lot, and like I don't know if this is a good response, but there is this book called Sustainable Rails. So a book called Sustainable Rails. It doesn't cover everything that we spoke about, but like it nudges you to start thinking in a lot of different ideas. So like one of the chapters talks about routing, and that's one great resource that I have. Obviously, the documentation is one very, very boring resource, but then it's great. And there are like I always watch between Drifting Ruby and Go Rails. I'm pretty like up to date with that. So and before that, of course, what was the other one? Ruby Tapas. That was but that was more Ruby. So but yeah, but like and then there are like a behemoth of blog posts that you have to like sift through. But again, I hope this is not sounding like oh yeah just like but it's just like as I was looking for these things, a lot of like different resources came up, and then I was like referencing the application that I was working on, and then I'm like, hey, this was cool to find, and then so like maybe the scope with the param, I think that one is pretty cool idea because what happened was why I came to that type of solution was that trying to provision SSLs for subdomains is a pain in the butt, and like I've done that in the past and I wanted to move away from it. So, and then I saw like Basecamp does this, and I'm just like, yep, whatever, that probably is a good idea. And so like I went down to a path to try to figure out how that was done. And it took a lot of like trial and error to figure out like, hey, I can actually do the trick with the URL where I override the URL helper, or was it called URL params, I think. I can't remember the method is in the not to params, like the sorry. Yeah, I think like so hold on, we go back to yeah. Oh, sorry, URL options. So to when you override the URL options, and then like that figures it out. Yeah. But yeah, so like.
But it's interesting that because these are all in Rails already.
These are all in Rails. A lot of them are specifically in the documentation. And this is the thing is, just like every single time that I go into looking into these resources, it's just like, oh shit, so much we don't know. There's like so much that we can't use. And a lot of the times, I always get stuck on something like this. I'm just like, I don't know what the difference between a namespace and a resource is, or like a scope, sorry. But I'm not gonna find out now. And that kills me. It's like I know that these two things that I'm confused about, but I'm just not bothered to look at it. And then when you look at it, you're like, this could have solved me a lot of things just by looking, right? And I think that's the important message in here. Like the documentation, as painful as it is, and I have been writing Rails now for about 10 years, and every single time I go into that documentation, I swear to God, I find something I've never even heard of before.
Well, what's interesting is that these features are there, so someone must have thought of that in its use case.
100%.
It's just waiting for us to discover exactly the same problem this person was thinking of.
Literally.
And then, yes, this is there on the plate.
Exactly.
You just needed to read the documentation.
Yeah. So like I think sometimes I've seen this idea where like people don't want to delve really deep into Rails or Ruby, just like, I want to skip the Rails magic bit, or I want to be able to do more readable code, quote unquote. Like, I think that's bullshit. Like, I think just go as deep into Rails and Ruby and do whatever you want, go into the deep end. And sorry if I have to say this, like, types sucks. Don't use types, like, and so yeah, Ruby is wonderful and I love it.
Right. Yeah. Thanks for that. I guess it's a combination of like experience and use case, and also just going through the documentation and all other materials.
Yeah, and it's like some of the books, like they really do help. It's like there are a lot of books out there. There are a lot of books on like refactoring, and and they don't always have to be like Ruby type books. Just like you can take any of these concepts we talked about, anything with the routing, you can like plop it into any language that you're doing, and even like even when you do like stimulus, you're trying to figure out like, all right, how do I manage these concerns, or sorry, these controllers, or these routes, or how does it go? How do you want it to go, right? So you just keep thinking about that. Like, give yourself the time to just think about these things for a little while, just like, and look at what some of the other things, like some of them, like, sorry to be so long-winded in this answer, some of them, they just seem so basic, just like I've used routes for 10 straight years. Every single day of my life, I ride Rails. Like, I've literally not moved away from Rails for the past 10 years. Every day I use routes. But then it's like there's such deep ideas within there that can help you, exactly like what Tristan said.
Just concerns. Whoa.
Right.
That's a new idea for me. It's
Exactly. Just like just little things that make a lot of difference. And this is what makes Rails Rails. This is why no Laravel, no JS framework, none of that have come close to it. Like, they really haven't, because there's all these nuances that have been thought about long before, really, really hard by the community, by a lot of people, much smarter than I am, and they put it in there, and it works great. Love Rails.
Nice. All right. I don't see any questions from YouTube. I guess we can kind of end this part. Once again, Has, thanks for the wonderful talk.
You're most welcome. Okay, can I just say one last? Oh, yeah, we have a question here.
Sorry,
I'm
a beginner level of
Yeah.
your Rails. So one of the what if the just now customer section? Just now you did mention customers resources is better than customer section.
Yes.
So what if there is a way that we want to make it in customer section actually better than customer resources? For example, you use like any situation into the refund thing.
Yeah.
Refund. Is there any way
To keep it in the same controller?
yes, to make it
Like, you can, for sure you can. Like, it's not a wrong or right answer, but like, it's just about like how you start to organize these things. Because like, once you have a lot of custom actions in some of your controllers, then your application is just going to be all over the place. So like, what is the main concern of this controller? So you want to keep it to be like, this controller only looks at the orders, and then this other one only looks at refunds. We try to avoid any example where like we are joining the two. Like, this order controller also, like, if you want to refund, you go in there. And then, hey, maybe generate CSV, we also go in there. Just like, so like, you want to keep the controllers very focused. You want to keep them very scoped to one single thing. Again, it's not that there is no time for, like a custom action. So like the example that we had just now was archive. Sure. So like, that sounds like a great custom action because it is action on the same resource. Just like I am archiving the order. I am not doing anything adjacent to the order. I'm not taking the order and refunding it, which is another idea, right? It's just like the order is still there. Somebody made that order, that's never going to change. But like the refund, somebody else did something else to it. So somebody else did something that touched that order. So do you see that the difference is like I'm doing the refund to the order. I'm not specifically refunding this order. This order is always going to be there. So just like, especially with like domain-driven development and like CQRS type of ideas, right? Where you don't want to just delete or append something, right? You want to say that, hey, this is a new event. This is a new event. Because like somebody had to say, hello, can you please refund my order? And so that's an event, so that's a request, and then somebody went and did it. So like that's another thing, right? So like that is the thing. But then like when you archive an order, that is a custom action on that same like controller.
so it's still okay like to
Of course, so of course, just like, again, anything that we shared, there's no hard and fast rule, like even if you think something that in your application today is wrong, as long as it's there, as long as it's working, it's fine. Don't worry too much about it. But think about it the next time you work on that. Like, hey, maybe I can remove this when I'm working on it, or like when I'm creating something new. I'm like, hey, maybe I think about this now. You don't have to go and like today I'm going to go clean my entire application up and fuck everything up. That usually never ends well. So take it slow slowly and step by step, and then that will help you get there.
And I think you hit the nail on the head when you said it was a refund and then it grows. Because in the beginning, it's a custom action.
Yeah.
Maybe a refund is like a flag on the order. But then it grows, the concept grows.
That's
and
right.
then when you were talking about extracting out that concept, it's because eventually refund becomes something else.
That's
And
right.
that's when you add more custom actions, and then now there's a lot more custom actions,
That's right.
which are extra concept in itself. You move it down to a resource. And I think the reason why it's a resource is better than an action in that particular scenario is that because it gives life to this
Exactly.
concept.
It brings it.
Yeah, it's like new.
That's
It's
right.
its own thing.
Correct. So one idea that I really like is the idea that like I look at the folder structure and I can understand the application somewhat. So if I just see an orders controller, I would never know there is a way to refund. But then now if you have a refund, you'll be like, like there's something there, like adjacent to the orders controller that, like here is this something. So like I can start to imagine. This is what makes Rails so good, right? It's just like anyone has a Rails application, the folder structure looks exactly the same. Okay, you can imagine the models going here, the controls going here, and then like, okay, if we have a controller, I can imagine somebody is listing them, creating them, doing them, and then we have, but then I will never guess, right? I have to open the file to guess, to figure out if there's a refund. But then if there was a refund controller, I immediately start to piece these things in my mind. Yeah. So that was the question.
I think
Yeah, please.
can we like relate and use the before this topic TDD driven development into like the refactoring the RB?
Yeah. Well, how do we do that?
How do we do that?
So that's the good thing about having the test first, right? So it's like when you start to move pieces, you automatically start to see the failing tests. So like you already have existing tests; these are all should be passing, and then you start to move them a little bit, and then they start to fail. And then you move the test along. You're like, all right, the test should go into the new refunds controller. It should be its own thing. It's like that's how you want to go about it.
Understand?
Yeah.
Okay.
Great question, man. It was a great talk. I think for sure.
All right.
But,
Understand.
oh shit! One last thing. Sorry. Just like Michael Cole from Thailand has asked me nicely and politely if I could shout out like RubyConf Thailand, which is happening at the end of this year. So like they've gone ahead and.
I was so late in announcing.
Oh, yep. So this is gonna happen somewhere around there. So like.
RubyConf Thailand.
That's right. So if somebody speaks to Michael, tell him
The last
relate the
RubyConf
message.
was in Thailand.
That's correct.
See, 2019. That was before pandemic. The next one is going to be in Thailand again.
Yep. So this one is going to be December 10th to 11th at the same hotel, the Pullman Bangkok. So yeah, that's like I've relayed the message. I'm glad I remembered it. If Michael, you're watching, this was for you, man.
All right. Yeah, I guess we can kind of like juncture in into parking lot, which I think you shared. Like there is RubyConf Thailand ongoing. That's good to know. I think another thing to highlight was I think they released RailsConf 2022 talks. I think a few weeks ago.
Yeah,
So yeah, those videos are worth watching as well. So if anyone's not already in the know, check out the RailsConf 2022 videos. Anything else in this section before we kind of wrap up? Anyone has anything to share?
Next month, we're probably hosting again unless someone else wants to host it. I think we're going forward. We're doing this type of hybrid thing, right?
that'd be great.
So we have the online people and then we have the actual meetup. But I personally prefer the physical meetup.
I
because
agree.
you have the interaction. It's just more fun. I don't know how we can replicate it with the online crowd, but we'll see.
Yeah, it's gonna be hard replicating that. But yeah, I think COVID is still here, so yes, it's gonna be like this for a while. All right. I guess one more thing to share is I will kind of be stop co-hosting Ruby Tuesday because I'm relocating. So it will be very challenging for me to help co-hosting. So I guess in the future, if anybody who would like to give a talk or anything and all, I guess you can reach out to Tristan and also Guia.
Or
That's kind of the last thing on the job. Right. I guess that's it. We can wrap up this one session. Thanks everybody for coming. Thanks Has. Thanks Afi for your wonderful talks. I'll guess we'll see everybody around.
Bye.
Okay,
See you. Hopefully more people.